Michigan State. ESPN published a report of a, quote, pattern of widespread denial, inaction, and information suppression surrounding sexual assault within the athletics program at MSU, as well as on the campus as a whole. The report shed light on rape accusations and charges of violence against women by former basketball players and a graduate assistant. It goes on to detail at least 16 football players accused of sexual assault or violence against women. Both football coach Mark D'Antonio and basketball coach Tom Izzo say they have no plans of stepping down from their positions. This in the wake of the university being caught up in the gymnastics scandal surrounding former Michigan State doctor Larry Nassar. This is a conversation to be had, and I'm going to kick the conversation off, start it this way. I don't believe we can talk about this in broad terms. I don't think we can say sexual harassment and sexual allegation is a vague thing that's just sort of sweeping the nation. I think we have to get into specific, which is why I'm glad that we are talking about MSU, for example, this morning. This is happening to specific people. This is happening to our sisters and our mothers and people we know and people we care about. And nothing changes if nothing changes. That's just what this has come down to, and that means accountability. Somebody or a group of people have to be held accountable, or nothing changes, or this is just a conversation that keeps going on, or these are just allegations that we keep hearing about. And until someone is held responsible, this is just a continuing and ongoing conversation. And I don't care how successful your organization is, how much money the university is making, how many awards or accolades or, how big things have gotten. It does not justify this happening one time, just one instance of it. And I do understand that people will say, well, this is bad for business. Well, it doesn't matter at this point, and we've gotten to the point where it really can't matter. And let's not forget that in addition to the allegations against the former players at MSU, Michigan State University harbored the single worst sexual abuser in the history of this country in Larry Nassar. They let him stay there, knowing there were reports out against him. And they let him continue to do what he did until very recently. And I wouldn't be surprised if this is something that is happening at other universities, other big universities across the country today.
Well, of course not. Baylor. It happened to Baylor last year. So we shouldn't be shocked. We had Baylor 2017. We got Michigan State 2018. We see through corporate America with the Me Too, I have to be honest. I'm very, very happy because a day of reckoning is coming, not only for young people, but for women. At some point, we have to decide that women are a valuable asset to our society. And I'm really disappointed in parents, in educators, and in coaches of what they're put here to do. As a parent, God trusted me with 2 kids, and the least thing that I could do is listen to them. So to have these kids report these things to their parents, and their parents dispute the children and what they're telling them. It's not like kids just make up stuff like this. So when are we going to support our kids? When are we going to support our women? When is enough enough? And to me, I'm very, very happy there's a day of reckoning coming, also as far as corporate America. And you can believe that every day thousands of men wake up and they are terrified if their name is going to be released as finally being involved in this. And I just think that we have to realize what's going on. And we have just become so cavalier about sexual assault and how we're going to treat women, and we're the kids telling the truth. That to me, I'm glad that these things are happening. I believe they should be unveiled. I believe that the people should be penalized. But even after that, what are we personally going to do? What are you going to do? What are you going to do? What am I going to do? And for me, it's been about being a great role model, setting a great example for my son and my daughter, but also listening to them enough that they would have my ear. But I'm really disappointed when the kids cried out for help, and that being either to professors, either to their teammates, and especially to their parents, that the parents didn't come running to try to help out their kids, instead of validating the stories, they actually didn't believe them at all. So I'm glad something is happening. I believe this is just the beginning of the correction, not only from a business standpoint, because there's still companies out there that are hiding people that have sexually assaulted people for years and gotten away with it. There's still sports programs hiding people that have gotten away with this for years. And enough is enough.
And you mentioned the parties that victims went to for help and didn't receive it. And one that went on to say was the police. And this is really, really tough. Like, I walk around with like all this privilege, right? It's like straight white male privilege. And I'm very aware of the white part of it. I'm very aware of the orientation part of it. I think I've done for a long time a very bad job of being aware of the benefits and advantages that come along with being a guy. Over the last 6 months, I've tried to do a better job of talking to women close to me, some of the closest women in the world to me, and the number of them that either had dealt with a violent sexual assault or a very close call outnumbers the ones who said, no, I've never had to deal with it. I had my friend Jenna Wolf say, almost in passing when this came up a while ago, that, listen, I've just known when I decided I wanted to go into sports that sexual harassment was just something I'm going to have to deal with. Just going to have to figure out how to deal with it.
And it's also the advice that Jenna has given thousands of others, women, young women in this business, as far as how to approach it. Like, there is a method, you know, to going about this and how to be successful at it. And it's not acquiescing to the offers. It's being a professional, being better than the competition, being above reproach, but realizing in this, I mean, it's real. Like, you're going to face these things, and you need to have a game plan for what you're going to do.
And it's just so, where Chris says he's glad the moment of reckoning is happening. I am glad that in 2018, we might be finally starting to approach allowing women equal protection under the law and equal citizenship. I'm glad we are getting closer to that. Where I'm disgusted and disheartened is, I understand right now, and for very good reason, we are focused on Michigan State, but it feels to me, when I watch this from outside of sports, as the world as a whole, that wherever we shine the spotlight, what we find is some horrible male actors acting as predators, and people in positions of power enabling or allowing for reasons that are beyond my comprehension. And Chris brings up the parents. Like, I'm a parent. I don't know what you do if your kid comes to you and says something happened to me. Because I think as a parent, you want to believe that it didn't happen.
Yeah, I know exactly what we're supposed to do. We see too many examples of what not to do. We call the police, all right, and we start an investigation. All right, it's time for us to stop listening to people that are crying out for help. And it starts.
Start listening. You said stop.
Start listening to people that are crying out for help. And like everyone, I hope that I've been an example of how a man should act in all these different situations. And I believe that that's at the beginning of it as parents. Now, we're not responsible for people being pedophiles and things like that.
Of course.
But if we're not going to listen to our kids, if we're not going to start listening to our kids after hearing some of the reports that we heard.
Right. We also have to create a culture that allows women to be comfortable enough to say something and not fear that it's going to get swept under the rug or forgotten. I was full-blown harassed in my first job in this business, and I was terrified. I had worked so hard to land my first job that I felt that if I said anything to anyone, and this was by my boss, that if I said anything to anyone, that it was going to somehow deter me from moving forward. I believe that. I'm telling you now, as someone who, I can't even believe that I thought it then. It was something I truly, truly believed back then. It affected me to a point where I didn't know if I should stay in the business or not. I plowed through and I moved on, and I was very successful and I was very lucky, and I met with other instances of it. But to this day, I think back on how things would have changed if I felt comfortable enough to say something to someone as a young person just starting out in this business. And I fully understand that when the culture is not created, where there's an open conversation, where people are allowed to say something not just to their parents, but to anyone, that they will be met with someone who will
and that they'll be believed. And they will be believed. That's why I brought up the police, because it seems like in a lot of these instances, if a woman brings forward allegations, she is the one that is then investigated, so that they will be believed. And then for women that aren't dealing with felony assault, but are dealing with a level of harassment that might not be a criminality, but is improper in the workplace, that they will not be expected to deal with it because that's part of the job.
Right.
That we almost have glorified, like if you watch the show Mad Men, like the era of like guys drinking at work and then just slapping the secretary on the behind, and just it's like a wink and a nod. And the idea that it's just like, oh, you work in the food service industry. Well, obviously, that's going to...
Sure.
Oh, okay.
Locker
well,
rooms,
you work in Congress. Well, listen, you're going to... And what's so scary to me is what we're yet to see is a really high-profile person in an industry have the spotlight shined on them, and then they're the only one. It's like, oh, one morning news anchor. So then it's every network. Oh, one congressperson. Then it's a half dozen. One Hollywood executive. Then it's a third of Hollywood. It seems to be rampant everywhere.
I think it's a societal question that we, as a society, what are we going to continue to accept? You know, 9/11 happened. We made some drastic changes. You know what we said? Our theme then? Yeah. If you see something, say something. Now, what's wrong with that as far as sexual predators, sexual assault? Like, what's wrong with that? If you see something, you should say something. If you're being violated as a kid, I hope you can find someone that has an ear to hear your voice. And I'm so happy that the day of reckoning is coming. And there's a bunch of people out there now still hiding people that have sexually assaulted people and still covering stuff up. And God, I so hope that you are revealed and brought out into the light, which everyone else, so that we can all learn, so that we can get better as a society. Because that's really the problem.
Right.
We don't listen to our kids. We don't take women seriously. And as a man in this society, I'm not proud. Because in all these situations, there was a man or men that could have stood up and said something. And when a man stands up and says something, it's different than anyone else. But we're not doing that.
And for the guys out there, and this is the last thing I'll say on this, I know the majority of guys out there watching, they're not predators. They're not harassers. I would challenge those, and I challenge myself as well. When you hear guys laughing about things that you're like, I would never do that. But you're there, and they're your friends, they're your colleagues. There's one thing to not engage in it. It's another thing to actively have the uncomfortable conversation like, whoa, hold on. What'd you say? Why do you think that's okay? Like, it's tough. It's tough as guys it's easier to just be like, I don't want to hang out with him anymore. And to me,
it's criminal the other way. All right? It's criminal. Like, we've seen enough. See something, you should say something.
I will end this the way we started it. Nothing changes if nothing changes. And we are starting to see that, and it's going to be a long time before we get to even close to the end of it. But the last couple months have set the stage for what is to come. We will leave it there for now. More First Things First right after this.
Right now at Burger King, you can get 2 cheeseburgers.